Welcome to Table Bible Studies with Dan and Ben. New studies are posted every Thursday. We're studying the book of Daniel and pick up with Daniel chapter 4 today, where we find out about another one of the Babylonian king's dreams.
Well, we are in Daniel chapter 4.
Yes, we are.
And let me begin, by making a statement that we hear frequently, which is the Bible was completely written by Jews.
Yeah.
And that's almost true.
Almost
true. But this chapter 4 is actually written by a Gentile king, a fellow by the name of Nebuchadnezzar. We've gotten to know good old Neb a little bit these first few chapters, and he comes across as kind of a hothead, ready to kill people if they don't please him.
Yeah.
But still, God has so intervened on behalf of his own people, Daniel and his three friends, that Nebuchadnezzar has come to have a certain measure of respect. But his respect is going to go even higher in this chapter, to the point where many people feel he was converted and became essentially a true believer.
Yeah.
Now, this chapter 4 has been called a state document. It was sent out by the king all over his kingdom. He wanted people to know something. Now, state documents in those days were normally declarations of war, letting the people know we're going to war against our neighboring country, and we want all available men to join the army and help us fight the enemy. But this was not a declaration of war. This was a declaration of the greatness of God.
Okay.
So quite an amazing statement, an amazing chapter. There's a lot to it, and we're going to have to cover it rather quickly.
Okay.
Let's see. It's got 36 verses, but anyway, it starts out with a statement by Nebuchadnezzar. This is his document that he had printed and reprinted and sent out to his kingdom, and he had a big kingdom. He says, "To all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in the earth, in all the earth." Well, that might have been a slight exaggeration, but his kingdom comprised a great many nations and kingdoms, and so he's sending it out to everybody that's under his influence.
All right.
He starts out saying, "Peace be multiplied to you," so this kind of gives you the idea, okay, it doesn't sound like war, sounds like peace.
Yeah, we're going to get peace.
So he says, "I thought it good," and we believe God thought it good for him to write this down.
Yes.
"I thought it good to declare," this is verse 2, "the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me."
Wow.
Pretty good coming from a Gentile king, talking about signs and wonders and God. He's not just saying the God of the Hebrews, but the Most High God, which is a very Jewish term for God, the Most High God.
At least he recognized there is a Most High.
He certainly
God.
did.
Yes.
And given his experience, I guess you can understand why he would recognize this.
He's a believer now.
Yeah, he says, "How great," verse 3, "how great are his signs, how mighty his wonders.
Yeah.
His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation." Boy, talk about praises. He's doing pretty well for being an old, ornery, hot-headed king.
I think seeing is believing. He saw what God has done.
Yes, he did.
And now he's like, whoa, I got it all wrong. Now, I am on an alignment with, this Most High God. He is the main thing, y'all. I am writing to you to just, express my feelings concerning him. He is the real deal.
Right. I have heard one particular pastor talk about how good it is to write your testimony down, how you came to know Jesus, make it into a pamphlet, have them print up a bunch of copies, and then when you meet people, you can say, well, this is what happened to me. You pass out a testimony. In fact, I've done that. I have my testimony of how I came to Jesus.
Yeah.
As a
mine
pamphlet.
is in my book.
Yeah, you've got a whole book.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of like what Nebuchadnezzar did, right? He tells his
Yes.
testimony of how he came to believe in this Most High
You're right.
God.
You're right. This
So
is it.
This is
Yeah.
his little autobiography. He didn't tell all the story of his life,
goodness.
but he's telling how he came to recognize
Yeah,
the greatness
yeah.
of God. Now, it's not like this is the first time he has experienced God. You know, when he met Daniel and he was ready to kill all the advisors, and Daniel
Yes.
interpreted his dream. Well, he experienced God then.
Mm.
When he was ready to kill Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, and God protected
showed
them,
up. Mhm.
he met God then, but he still wasn't quite totally converted somehow. But boy, this seems to have done it.
Yeah.
So he starts out, and it gives us a little hint about the time frame here.
Mm.
It says in verse 4, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. Now, why is that significant? In his early days, he was almost constantly at war, conquering kingdoms, conquering neighboring nations,
Yeah.
expanding Babylon. Babylon rose to become a great empire in a very short time. Now, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't the first king. He was the second. So his daddy, I forget his name, but his daddy was really the one who pulled away from the Assyrian Empire and built up the Babylonian Empire. So Nebuchadnezzar was the son, but he was even more ambitious than daddy, apparently, and he really went at it and expanded the kingdom of Babylon greatly.
Yeah.
But when he says, I was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace,
Yeah.
it indicates he had passed the stage where he was in the conquering phase of his kingdom, and he had pretty much conquered what he wanted to conquer, and now he was taking it easy. In fact, as he describes how proud he was of his building achievements, well, when you're a warrior king and you're going out practically all year long conquering, you don't have time for big building projects. You're just out fighting to capture one nation after another and conquer one nation after another. But once you have come to a place of peace, then you can rest. And that seems to be the case. So what we're talking about here is quite a few years after the early stories about Daniel and his three friends.
Right.
You remember they were just probably teenagers when they first came. By this point, they're probably middle-aged, maybe 40s, maybe even early 50s. And Nebuchadnezzar has had a lot of conquests, a lot of battles. Everything's going his way, a lot of revenue coming in from all these conquering the nations he's conquered. He's built beautiful things in Babylon. They talk about the Ishtar Gate, which was like a huge project. One of the interesting things is Babylon was pretty much built with brick. They didn't have a lot of stones. The Jews built with stone. And if you ever go to Israel, you haven't been there yet. Hopefully we can go sometime. But you find they have no shortage of stones.
Okay.
But in Babylon, they didn't have a lot of stones, but they had a lot of clay, and they made bricks out of them, and they built things with brick. And so the Ishtar Gate was built with bricks. Many of them were painted blue. They had all kinds of engravings. They had gold lions and different things on the walls. Now, this was just a gate, mind you. This wasn't the city. This is one of the ways you got into the city.
Into the city, wow.
And it was like one of the wonders of the world. Everybody just wanted to go in
See
through
that
that gate
gate.
and see. He had spent a lot of
How
money.
it looks like.
And probably used a lot of slaves to build that. And that was just one example. He had a wife who was from the mountainous country, and he built her some fake mountains around Babylon so she could, feel
at
like
home.
I'm at home. And he built an incredible garden for her. They called it the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So he must have really loved his wife, and of course he was proud of it too. So he was a real builder. Now that he wasn't having to fight all the time, he turned his attention to building and had done a fantastic job, had a magnificent city that he had built up and made beautiful. Right. So he is now home. He says, I'm flourishing. I'm doing really well in my palace. And then he went to bed. And guess what happened?
He had a dream.
He had a dream. But this one was probably not the kind of dream we would really want to see.
Okay.
So if we look at verse 5, he says, I saw a dream which made me afraid. The thoughts on my bed, the visions of my head troubled me. And so he issues a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon, wants them to tell him, what does this dream mean? Now, he doesn't do it the way he did earlier. You remember where he said, you got to tell me the dream, and then you can interpret it, and if you don't, I'll kill you. He's not quite as so rough and wild as he was in those earlier days. So they came in, but somehow they can't satisfy him. And it's interesting. He doesn't call Daniel first. Why not? I don't know. So, I heard one commentator say he was probably afraid of what Daniel might tell him because this is a little bit on the negative side. But he says at last Daniel came. So sooner or later, here comes Daniel. Now, keep in mind, this is not a 20-year-old anymore. Yeah. This is a man probably in his 50s.
I think he did the right thing, because if he surpassed all his wise men and his king's men, and go and call Daniel, they will feel not respected. Yeah, they will feel ignored, rejected. You ignored us, you rejected us, and then you've gone to call, him. Why? You should have tried.
The Jewish guy, right?
Jewish guy.
He had a lot of Babylonian advisors.
You should have tried us first before going.
It could be. Maybe it was a diplomatic move to try to keep everybody happy.
He was a king. He knows the rules. Yeah. So when your king's man has failed concerning something, you can call outsider in.
Right. So he says his name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. Now, he had his own God. Somehow, the name they normally give his God is Marduk. Yeah. But apparently it had something to do with Belteshazzar. But he also says in him is the spirit of the holy God. So he almost says this is a spirit-filled man, folks, here. He's got the Holy Spirit in him. I don't think he would have quite put it in those terms. But he tells him his dream, and here's what it was. In verse 10, he says, I was looking, there was a tree in the midst of the earth. Its height was great. The tree grew, became strong. Its height reached to the heavens. So, I mean, that's got to be a pretty large tree, right? This beautiful, large tree that just grows and grows and grows until you can hardly see the top of it. Is way up in the heavens. It could be seen to the ends of all the earth. So it's so big, everybody knows about this tree. The whole earth has seen it. Its leaves were lovely, its fruit abundant. Very impressive tree, right?
Yes.
The beasts are hiding under its shade or resting under its shade. The birds live in its branches. And so it's feeding all flesh. Apparently it was a fruit tree and people would get fruit from it. Just a wonderful tree. But something's about to happen that's going to make this a miserable situation. So he says, while I'm having these visions, a watcher, a holy one. Well, we would call that, from a biblical perspective, an angel.
An angel.
He's king that he is, Gentile that he is. He just says it's a watcher, it's a holy one, who cries out from heaven, cut down the tree, cut off its branches, strip off its leaves. This is in verse 13. This beautiful tree that's feeding everybody. All the animals love it. The birds are nesting in it. People are eating its fruit. Cut it down. Let the beasts get out from under it. The birds leave its branches, nevertheless leave the stump and the roots in the earth bound with a band of iron and bronze. And it goes on to say in the end of verse 15, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, let him graze with the beasts. Now here it stops saying let it, and it says let him graze with the beasts, eat with the animals. And, of course, that's kind of a clue.
Oh, my goodness.
We're not talking about a tree here. We're talking about a man. In fact, a king.
Him.
Yeah, exactly.
Him. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Verse 16, once again, the word his. Let his heart be changed from that of a man. So his heart, his mentality is no longer that of a man. Let him be given the heart of a beast, and let 7 times pass over him. 7 seasons.
Times.
We tend to think it is probably 7 years.
Yeah.
This decision, verse 17, is by the decree of the watchers, the sentence by the word of the Holy One. So this is coming from heaven, and it is a decree. And so he says, in order, it tells the reason this is going to happen. This tree, or this him, as it says, it's coming from heaven. There's a decree coming from heaven. And why? At the end of verse 17, it says, in order that the living, which would be all people living, may know that the Most High, that would be God, rules in the kingdom of men, and he
Wow.
gives it to whomever he will
Yeah.
and sets over it the lowest of men.
My goodness.
So King
You would think
Nebuchadnezzar,
that God is really busy, in heaven,
Yeah.
not knowing what is going on. Even now, they'll be like, okay, the blood of Jesus has just covered him all over.
Yeah.
He sees nothing. He knows nothing. God sees everything that is going on.
So it
Jesus
tells us at the
Christ.
beginning, before Daniel ever opens his mouth, in the dream, the whole point of this experience for this tree / man / king is that people might know that God, the Most High, rules not just in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people will grant you, yeah, God's in charge of heaven.
Taking care of heaven.
Taking care of heaven, but it says he rules among men. That's right here down on the earth. That's here in Texas. That's in Nigeria and Kenya and Australia and just all over the world. God rules.
That's scary. But he said, heaven is his throne.
Yeah.
And the earth is his footstool. He walks around, and we
Yeah.
don't even know it. We don't see him.
And he makes decisions
He
as
makes
he's walking
decisions
around.
as he's walking around, taking care of business.
You're going up. You're going down. You, out of the way. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Get me another king.
Thanks for watching our study of the greatest book ever written, the Bible. In addition to these Bible studies with Ben and me, I also share what I call video devos, which are short teachings I give on various Bible topics. These teachings are normally, but not always, posted on Mondays. Be sure and click the subscribe button and then click that bell icon and choose Show All Notifications. That way you'll be notified every time we post a new video. And if you're struggling with diabetes, check out my other channel, which is called Beat Diabetes. God bless you, and see you again soon.